Welcome back to Tuesdays with Timeless. I'm Dr. Stefanie Christian. We've been talking about sunscreens, and today I'm going to talk about the best sunscreens for people who have melasma or post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, both of which are pigmentary challenges. But I think it's possible that by the end, you'll probably feel like I do, that everyone should be using a tinted sunscreen. So I'm going to start out by talking briefly about what melasma and post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation are, but these are just going to be brief descriptions. I am going to do a whole video just on melasma. Melasma is a pigmentary challenge that happens to mostly women in their reproductive years when their melanocytes, which are the cells that make and store pigment, are revved up, usually in a high estrogen or high progesterone state in the face of radiation, either sunlight or visible light, ultraviolet radiation, infrared light, LED light. And it could be that it's someone who's on birth control pills, or someone who's undergoing fertility treatments, or someone who's pregnant, or even someone who's having hormone replacement therapy a little early in life. And they might just have blotches of darker skin, or very prescribed, like the mask of pregnancy, or a line above their lips, or sort of a whale tail above their eyes. Anything more than that, I'll describe in the whole video that I do on melasma. Post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation is when the darker skin happens as a wound heals, and that wound might be pimples, or it might be an incision after a surgery, or a cut, or a scrape, or a burn. It's more likely to happen in someone who's got darker skin, but it can also happen in someone who's got lighter skin. So I'm going to talk very briefly on, as a review, on some terms that we've used before, and then some brand new ideas. First, UVB rays. These are ultraviolet rays from the sun that have a short wavelength, so they don't penetrate deeply into the skin at all. They do their damage on the surface, and they tend to be the burning rays, so they cause the skin to get pink or red. They do cause DNA damage, and so they can cause cancer. UVA rays have a longer wavelength, and they penetrate more deeply into the skin. They cause collagen damage, so they cause the skin to get saggy, and they cause wrinkles. But they do cause pigmentary damage, which is why they're also important for this discussion today. They can cause visible capillaries. They do also cause DNA damage, so they too cause skin cancer. Something that we have not discussed before, though, is visible light and how it affects the skin. Now, the visible light is the light that you see. It's what allows you to see during daylight. When you took physical chemistry, it's what you learned as Roy G. Biv, blue, indigo, violet, and that's the end of the visible spectrum that has the highest energy light. So it's abbreviated HEV, high energy visible light, and the wavelength there is closest to ultraviolet A waves. And so it penetrates even more deeply into the skin than UVA rays. And the damage it does is primarily pigmentary. So it worsens melasma, it worsens post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. It worsens damage that people in my generation did. We didn't have sunscreens. We couldn't have used it if we had wanted to. It wasn't there. And so we have all these little speckles all over our faces. Many of us have done things in order to get rid of those, but for people who still have them, it makes them worse. So where do we get that blue energy? Not only do we get it from the sun, and therefore we get it when we are outside during the daylight, but we also get it from TVs, computers, tablets, smartphones. Your kids get it from their gaming consoles. We get it from fluorescent lights. And therefore, it's not a daytime thing. People who work night shifts, people who work in hospitals, people who work in retail, and they don't even have windows, they're getting it all the time. And they can be getting it whatever shifts they're on. So let's talk a little bit about sunscreens. Most sunscreens don't protect against visible light. So let's do a review of sunscreens. Zinc oxide, which is my favorite sunscreen, should be the base of any sunscreen that you use. In its natural state is white, it's thick, and it protects against UVA and UVB rays. But we micronize it to try to make it as transparent as possible. But when you put it on darker skin, it definitely has a ghosting. Titanium dioxide is also naturally white and thick. It only protects against UVB rays, so it doesn't protect against the aging rays. We micronize it in order to try to make it as transparent as possible. But once you get it on darker skins, even mid skin tones, it has a ghosting. So in order to try to compensate or cover up, camouflage that ghosting, in the lab, they added iron oxide. Iron oxide has a natural red hue to it, and they felt like that gave it a nice natural skin tone. Well, only a nice natural skin tone for a very small percentage of the population. And so people worked hard to try to get better at that. And there are a lot of pigmentary iron oxides. There are black and red and yellow and orange. And then there are pigmentary titanium dioxides, which are blue and green. And now they can mix those into bases, and they're getting better and better at being able to match most skin tones. So cosmetically, they are getting more elegant. But scientifically, what have we found? Iron oxide protects against visible light, including that high energy visible light that is so bad with pigment problems. And oh, by the way, if you add iron oxide to zinc, it improves the protection against UVA rays. If you have zinc plus iron oxide, you get to 98.5% protection against UVA, those aging rays. And if you add iron oxide to zinc and titanium dioxide combined, those three are the perfect combination for someone who has melasma or post-inflammatory pigmentation. Those three together actually help prevent initial pigmentary damage. How do you know that it's got iron oxide? Well, the trick really is that it's a tinted sunscreen. Tinted sunscreens have iron oxide, but you won't find the iron oxide listed in the active ingredients. That's where you'll find zinc oxide and titanium dioxide. Iron oxide is still listed in the inactive ingredients and pretty far down on the list because it doesn't take very much iron oxide to give it the tint it needs. But you'll know because it's a tinted sunscreen. So if pigmentary issues, solar lentigines, which are the garden variety pigment damage that you get from the sun, or melasma, or post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation are issues for you, you should be using a tinted sunscreen. If avoiding pigmentary issues from the sun are an issue for you, then you should be using a tinted sunscreen. And if avoiding the ghosting from zinc is an issue for you, then you should be using a tinted sunscreen. So I think tinted sunscreen is sort of the way to go. So if you have any questions, leave a comment below. I love getting them and I love responding to them. Take care, have a great week, and I'll talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.